What's going on, everybody? Today's video is going to be slightly different. Okay, today I'm going to take you on a journey of me overcoming addiction and why I say that I believe that I'm lucky to be alive. That I should not be here. By all means, I should not be here. And I don't say that for drama. I say that because honestly, I shouldn't have made it this far. Right? I spent over 2 decades deep drowning in addiction, right? Alcohol, weed, cocaine, painkillers, you name it, whatever there was there to numb the chaos in my head, to help me escape myself, I took it. I fucked up relationships, burnt bridges, broke trust, ruined things, hurt people that I truly loved, and anyone who tried to help, I pushed them away because I did not want to hear it. Right? I've been to the courtrooms, the cells, lied to everybody, especially myself. Right? I've watched people that I love die from the same shit that was eating me alive. Okay, I sat in hospital beds not knowing if I'd ever walk again. And some of these moments, I didn't care if I did or not. And I was dying in slow motion. And part of me knew this. But no matter how far I fell, there was something inside that just refused to give up. And then there was one day I had a massive spiritual experience in the middle of my gym session that I didn't even want to do. A song came on that reminded me of my brother, right? I dropped to my knees. I felt something out of this world, and it was like a voice, a presence, something bigger than me cracked through the noise in my head. And that moment didn't just change my life, it actually saved it. And that's what I'm here about to talk about in this video. So I'm not here to preach. I'm not here to play the hero, right? I'm just here to show you what's possible. Because if someone like me, who went through all the bullshit, the chaos, the destruction, the shame, the guilt, if I can find my way back to myself, then so can you, right? And in order to understand my story, I need to go all the way back to being a child, right? Because I don't really remember the early years of my life. The earliest memory I have, and I was about 5 or 6 at the time, and my brother John and I were messing about in an escalator while my mum was distracted at an airport. And he was at the bottom, I was at the top, and I had a trolley at the top, and it got caught in the escalator, and it's went down. But, as it's went down, my brother is at the bottom. He's tried to, grab it, but his shoe's been caught in the escalator, so the escalator's cut through his shoe, and it severed his foot. Basically, he's cut through half of his foot on one foot, and then the other one, it's cut through half of his toe, right? And in that moment, I just froze. Right, I didn't know what was going on. There was blood, there was panic, and I was just there numb. And that memory stayed with me, not about just what happened, but the weight of what I believed about myself because of it. Right, and I thought I was the reason he got hurt, that everything was my fault, and that belief never truly left me. Even only when he was recovering, he was strapped up in casts for a long time, and 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 the thought, when I think back of that, I feel so guilty and ashamed because I wasn't there for him, right? And when this happened, we lived in South Africa, and I'd already been back and forward to South Africa twice. I was born there, went back to the UK, came back to the South Africa, right? So I'd spent, I'd been in different houses so many times on planes. And then my parents divorced when I was about 4. And I never really truly understood how that shaped me as a person until years later with a whole lot of self-discovery and a whole lot of healing. And my mum, God bless her, she is my hero. And so is my wife, right? My mum did everything that she could. She is the strongest woman I know. Both her and my wife, Jenna, they are my heroes. And growing up, my mum, she tried to give us everything. And she even went into debt to make sure that we had what we wanted. But no matter how hard she tried, something in me always felt off. I never felt like I belonged anywhere. And a part of that was probably because my dad wasn't around. And it wasn't that he never spoke to me. He just wasn't around in the way that a boy needs his father to be. And I did have an amazing man come into my life, my stepdad, Dave, right? And by that point, the damage had already been done. I'd already created the belief that I wasn't worthy or I wasn't good enough, right? Because my real dad didn't stick around, right? And my dad moved away. I can't remember the age, but when we were young, right? So it was after 4, so maybe about 6 or 7. And he went to live in London because he said it was too hard to watch another man raise his kids, right? And now I get it, but back then I didn't get it, right? I didn't understand it, and for a lot of years I blamed him, right? But now I don't blame him because I didn't know the relevance of the situation. But as a kid, you just don't understand, and I just felt his absence. So early on, I started acting out, right? I would steal bikes from my school shed, bikes that belonged to kids from my school, people who I had to face every single day. I was looking for attention, but I just didn't know that at the time. And when my mum met Dave, things in life, improved, right? He treated us like his own. He was he still is an amazing man, right? With a nice house, with the dogs, the cars, everything was great. But then, don't know what happened in my mum's life, but she wanted to move back to Scotland to be with her family. And I was about 8 years old. And this is when, everything shifted. Like, we moved back into Glasgow in an area called Greenfield, which is a rough council estate in the east end of Glasgow, right? So, me coming back from South Africa with this South African accent, putting it mildly, we didn't fit in. We were mocked, we were bullied, we were made to feel like we didn't belong there. So that just added on to me never feeling worthy or like I belonged or I was good enough. But my family were very different. They didn't run from fights. If someone hit you, you had to hit them back harder. If you cried, you were told to sort it out, man up. There was no softness. There was no, gentleness. There was no space for emotions. Okay, it was simple, right? My uncle they were hard. They were tough men, right? Violence wasn't just accepted. It was part of the culture. And when you're young, you have to learn to adapt pretty quickly. And I went from being this kind, little, soft, gentle person who wouldn't hurt a fly, and I had to really transform pretty quickly. And there was one time I remember there was an older kid in the next block, and he beat me up, right? And I remember going into my grand's house crying and, saying that he'd beat me up. And she looked me dead in the eye and she said, "You better go back out there and kick his fucking head in, right? And don't come back until you've done it." Right, so I did. Right, I went back out there. I grabbed the boy and I had him on the deck and I was punching him. My grandfather's came out. He's pulled me off him. And as the boys got up, he's jumped up and he's kicked me. And my grandfather just went, "Oh, fucking get him." Right? This was the environment that I grew up in. Right? There wasn't a week that passed where there wasn't some type of commotion or a fight. And a lot of these fights weren't even mine. I had a younger brother and I was his protector. And I did take that role seriously. But as I got older, the shit got darker. It wasn't just scraps anymore. You're talking gang stuff. You're talking about building a reputation. And for me, I leaned into that because being feared felt safer than being seen. And by the age of 15, I'd been to 6 different schools. I was constantly in trouble. And there was a point where I did try to go away from it. My dad had moved to America and I went over to live with my dad for a while to try this different life, but it didn't last long, right? I wanted to come back to my mum, my brother, and that hurt him deeply. And I know that now. But the truth is, I just never belonged. I felt like I never belonged anywhere. And when I came back to Scotland, I just came back to fucking more chaos. Right? And at this point here, I was 15. I had never touched alcohol. Right? I still had this belief that I was going to be a professional football player because I was good. Right? Before I went to America, I was getting scouted. When I came back, I'd signed with Partick Thistle, who were a pro youth team there. Right? And I wasn't drinking. And my friends all started drinking, and I just wasn't down with it. Right? But then you hang around with them long enough, and they entice you long enough, and I eventually caved in. Right? But see, when I had that first drink, everything changed. Okay? It was like I had found something to make me feel normal, right? I felt confident. I felt courageous. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could fit in, like I was normal, right? But what I didn't realize in that moment, that wasn't me finding myself or coming alive. That was me actually disappearing. That alcohol gave me a mask. It helped me hide the fear that I was feeling, hide the softness, that hid the caring, loving boy that I'd always been, right? And also, it was hiding the scared little boy that I still was. But under that mask, I became someone else. I became aggressive, manipulating. I became a fucking asshole, right? Chaotic. And my drinking started as it did for a lot of young boys, just once a week, right? On a Saturday. And it didn't last long before it was then Friday, Saturday. And then it was Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And eventually it was every single night. And somehow, despite all of this, football was still a little bit in there. But when the drinking became daily, football was gone. Okay? Nobody wanted to be dealing with me anymore. My attitude was stinking. I wasn't showing up for training. I was showing up when I could be bothered. Right? So the football, the sport that I had once loved, like so passionately, it was my dream, I no longer cared about because now it it was constantly, I just wanted to numb what I was feeling. And by the time I was 16, I'd been arrested for the first time. I was in an incident with a plainclothes police officer. Was he was he had his head split open, right? And I got dragged into it all. My face ended up being on the biggest Sunday newspaper. Someone else got the blame for it. He did 3 months in jail, and I walked away with a slap on the wrist. But looking back, that was the beginning of a chapter that I would like to forget. Okay, because from there it just got darker and darker. Courtroom after courtroom, charges got heavier: knife, serious assault, attempted murder. By the time I was 17, I had my first stint in a young offenders institute. By the time I had 18, I had my face slashed, I'd been stabbed, I'd been hit with bottles, bricks, you name it. And to be fair, this wasn't one-sided, right? They say you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And I'd done my fair share of damage, right? And this is the thing, I never got any trouble sober. Anytime I got into any type of trouble, there was always alcohol or drugs involved. It was never, because see, when I was sober, my mum used to say, I'm like Jekyll and Hyde. When I drink, I become somebody, this animal. And that's just how it was for me. And everyone around me could see that I had a problem. Even the courts did, right? The judge ordered me to go to alcohol counselling, but I just didn't care, right? I was in denial, straight up denial. And nobody could tell me anything because, you know what? I didn't want to listen. All I cared about was me. And when I was around 20, I had another opportunity and I thought I could outrun my demons and move to America, right? And I'd bumped into an old friend who was visiting from America and we used to play football together, and he set me up with a call with some coaches over in America, and somehow what I now believe was part of the divine design, right? I got a spot in a university football team over there, so it was a fresh start, a second chance at life, and I was thinking, I was all excited, right? But the reality was I couldn't outrun what lived inside of me. My demons followed me wherever I went, and so did trouble. Right, so I started university in August 2001, and I loved it. Back playing football again, my first pre-season with a new team, and it was, I was caught up in all and I was loving it, right? But it didn't take long for things to go sideways, right? You see, at university, big drinkers are celebrated, and I was quickly becoming the cool and popular kid, known as that crazy Scotch kid who could drink a lot, right? And that did nothing but feed into my destruction, because this was a first year of a 4-year degree, which ended up going into a 5.5-year degree by the time I'd changed my major so many times. I'd lost credits, I'd failed classes, I'd changed universities. So it was a year and a half more than I was supposed to do. Right, but anyway, the first year, I was kicked off the team after the first year. I got into trouble with the police, I'd been arrested. And when you're playing for a high-profile university team, the coach finds out everything. So I was kicked off the team, but lucky enough, there was a university not far that knew who I was, knew my ability, and and I was able to go to that team. Okay, but this is the thing, nothing changed, right? Even then, when I went there, nothing changed. I had multiple arrests, drunk driving, robbery. I'd spent time in county jail, locked up with real criminals, and you would think that'd be enough to wake me up, right? But no, the moment I was released, I was out celebrating, back to drinking and snorting coke, right? And I met a lot of great people who did try to help me, and I only know that looking back now, because some of my university friends, they're still some of the best friends that I've ever had, because they genuinely cared. But I was just so much in denial. I was so gone. I was so consumed with the want to escape, that was the most powerful thing. It was just constantly wanting to escape. I could never be me. Everywhere I had to take something to go anywhere, and that just followed me throughout my whole time in America. And then I had my graduation party was in 2006, and it was pretty clear that my time was up there, right? I had so many runs in with the police. The police knew who I was. I'd been to court one too many times, and my last court visit didn't go down too well because I'd committed a felony in the country of America. I was ordered to be deported, so I had 90 days to go back to the UK. So I asked the judge, could I spend those 90 days with my dad in Florida? And he said yes, right? So he agreed, but that message didn't get relayed on to my probation officer. So when I didn't show up for probation, my officer put out some type of warrant or whatever it was, and I was deemed a flight risk. So I'm down in Florida and I've got these pissed off ICE officers looking for me. And if you don't know who ICE officers are, they're immigration and custom enforcement. You don't want to fuck with these guys. These are pretty ruthless, crazy motherfuckers. So I'm in my dad's house and I'm getting some extra money. I'm helping him work, and it's about 7:30 in the morning. We're going out to the truck, and as I go out to the truck, there's, my dad lives in this gated community, right? So it's this posh upscale neighborhood in Florida, in a place called Weston, right? So it's super expensive area, and you go and the neighbors didn't expect to see what they saw, right? There was 10 or even more armed officers, right? Rifles, badges. They were surrounding the house. They were getting ready to raid the house, right? And they were looking for me because when I walked out, they had this clipboard and it had my picture of me and it had my car registration. And so my first instinct was to try and run because I knew they were there for me. But my knees were trembling. My knees were my legs were like jelly. I wasn't going fucking anywhere except to Chrome Detention Centre. Now, if you don't know what Chrome Detention Centre is, it's a maximum security prison for foreign nationals who are awaiting trial or deportation. And they initially told me that I'd be released that night. It was a lie. Then it would be 2 weeks, another lie. So I ended up going to this prison full of violent offenders, right? To paint a picture, right? They had some of the worst in there. So the real worst ones, murderers and that, they wore red jumpsuits. Then they had the violent offenders in orange jumpsuits. Then you had the blue and the grey for the less serious ones. Now, I got given an orange jumpsuit, right? So I was put out quite as a violent offender. So I got placed in a unit with a mix of orange and red. So I was surrounded by some serious motherfuckers, and I was the only white guy in the place, right? I don't know how I survived, but I do know because God was protecting me the whole time, or the divine was protecting me, because everything I believe was in divine orchestration, right? Because I survived that and with no problem. I had one argument with some Mexican guy in the yard when we were playing football. It was one punch and that was over. No retaliation, and I ended up being taken under the wing of a group of black guys that I would play poker with, and they kind of looked out for me. Now, it was scary, right? Because in the block, there was 66 bunks in the block, and I was the only white guy. It was all black guys or Mexicans or Hispanics, right? And there was no other white. I was the only white, and I felt like I was being protected. So I was there for what felt like years, but it was about 4 months, and I had two choices. I could stay and fight the case, which meant staying locked up there, but I knew that if I fought the case, I would lose anyway because I'd already been deemed, I went through the whole process prior. So I'd agreed to just go be deported. And then I'm in there one night around 2 a.m. The guards come in again, armed guards. They pull me out my cell, no warning, no heads up to my family, nothing, right? Because they deemed me a flight risk. So they thought that, I don't know what they thought, if they would have somebody who was going to fucking break into the van or get me or whatever. I don't know what they thought I was, but it's not who I was. There was no way I was going to risk anything, right? I was still scared shitless, right? But anyway, I was put on a plane, deported back to Scotland. When I get to Scotland, I've got the police in Scotland waiting for me there. I get off and they ask me, were you treated okay? And I kept asking, and the whole way back, I'm escorted by two guards, one on each side, and these guys are armed, right? So the whole way back, I'm not allowed to do anything. They've took the cuffs off me, but there's still one on either side. I keep asking them, so am I allowed back in? Will I ever be allowed back in? They said nothing. So when I get back and I'm in the room with the officers, they give me this piece of paper that says I'm never allowed to re-enter America ever again. And that broke my heart because I have so many friends over there. My father's over there, my stepmom's over there. And at the point, my brother was over there. And so anyway, I come back and I've got no plan now. I don't know what I'm going to do. But so what happens is I just drop straight back into the same cycle, same friends, same habits, same fucking madness, right? But God works in mysterious ways, because about 6 months after I got there, it was just partying all the time. I was, getting knee deep into drugs again, and I was just fucking spiraling down so quick. And God decided, well, I'm going to make sure you don't move, right? And I woke up one morning and I could not feel my cock or my balls or my left leg. So I was paralysed basically from the waist down on the left-hand side. I was rushed to hospital. They couldn't do anything. So I was then blue lighted to another hospital. And I was terrified because I couldn't feel anything. But cut a long story short, I was diagnosed with a very rare thing called Cauda syndrome, right? Which is a rare condition, and if it's not treated, you can be permanently paralysed. So they caught it just in time, but if they said if it would any longer, I would have been paralysed for the rest of my life. And they gave me a small % chance of fully recovering. Now, but that meant that I was stuck in bed for a long time, right? going through intense rehab, and I couldn't go out and do what I was doing because I was on a one-way track down, right? And if I kept going the way I was going, it was only a matter of time before something happened to me. Either I died and overdosed and back in jail or whatever. So I couldn't go out partying anymore. I couldn't chase the chaos anymore. I couldn't run the streets. But that didn't stop the demons in my mind. So now I'm stuck in bed, drowning in self-pity, fucking depressed out my mind. I'm getting painkillers from the doctors. Now, because I knew so many people where I was getting cocaine dropped off my house, I was getting alcohol dropped off. And even though I couldn't walk, I could still get these things. So now I'm in full blown destruction mode, just with a different setting. Right. And most of the time I'm sitting myself. So a lot of the time I'm in tears, I'm crying, I'm feeling sorry for myself. Right. And people are starting to get worried about me, right? Because I had a girlfriend at the time, and she had to witness all this. So my family had an intervention, and this is when I was sent to South Africa. This was my first inpatient rehab treatment in South Africa, of all places. Right, so I was coming up to 30 years old at the time, and this wouldn't be the first time in rehab, and I'd been to like an outpatient before, but this was the first real. The outpatient was when I was caught mandated by the court in America. This one was an inpatient, and but I would still have another visit in years after this. So I got out of rehab and I stayed sober for about 18 months. But I stayed sober. I was still using weed every day, and I was still taking painkillers every day. So I was just substituting my drug of choice. That's basically what it was. But I was miserable. I was fucking. I hated my life because I was white knuckling it basically. And one of the closest people I had to me was my friend Mark. And I remember the day getting the call saying Mark's dead, and I just broke down. And even speaking about it now, I just didn't know how to deal with that. And and his mum said to me, she said, "Son, please sort yourself out. Don't let this happen to you." And I was broken. I didn't know how to deal with this, and we had a mutual friend, and our mutual friend was Grant, and he was running a caravan site down in the about 2.5 hours drive from me, and he said, "Listen, I need somebody to, be a salesman." He said, "You've got sales experience. Why don't you come down?" And I was like, "Right, okay." So I'll come down. So I come down there, and this place is great. It gets me away from Glasgow, away from the chaos, and another maybe fresh start. And again, this is when I believe God intervenes, because if Mark hadn't died, I wouldn't have went to Berwick. And in Berwick, I met the woman of my dreams. She's now my wife, the woman who has saved me over and over again. But even though I go and have this fresh start, I haven't dealt with the inner turmoil that's inside me. I'm still feeling reckless. I'm still trying to escape, and I'm still causing destruction everywhere I go. Right. And my poor wife, she was so innocent and so pure, and she had never been corrupted or understood addiction. And when I started to fall in love with her, I sat her down and gave her the opportunity. I told her about my history about alcohol and drugs and, my past and stuff. And I said, "Do you still want to be with me?" And she said, "Yes." Right. So this woman loved me. Right. And I didn't know how to deal with love like that. But so I was still causing destruction. It was still years of chaos. And even my brother, he died of an overdose. And even then, it didn't stop. The pain of losing him even drove me deeper into the destruction. More drink, more drugs. I ruined everything. Birthdays, I ruined my brother-in-law's wedding. I ruined my mother-in-law's wedding. Christmases, I destroyed trust. I burnt so many bridges. I was in and out of court. There was so many things that I was doing wrong. And even though I knew I had a problem, I wanted to desperately stop, but I couldn't stop. No matter how much I wanted to stop, I was just destroying everything, and including the woman that I truly loved more than anything. And now I've got children, which I promised that I would be there for them. I would be the best dad, and yet the alcohol and the drugs are still taking priority over my life, and they're still causing me so much pain inside. And I hate myself. I'm hating the man that's in the mirror. I'm hating how I'm acting. And I've done home detoxes. I've done meetings. I've done therapy. I've done everything. And the the breaking point was at the end, just after I'd ruined my brother-in-law's wedding. My wife she'd had enough, and I'd had enough as well, because it got to a point where I didn't want to be here anymore. I had the belt around my neck, and Jenna came and caught me. I didn't want to be here anymore. I'd been up to the crisis unit twice because I was suicidal. The pain was just so much, and I just didn't know how to deal with it. So I went to more therapy. I'd been at the doctors. I've seen specialists, and I got this place in a rehab visit, right? Because up until that, they told me not to stop drinking. So I was drinking from the moment I woke up to I passed out. Jenna was, she was in so much pain watching me, but also I was making her feel guilty because I was making her to go out and get me the drink. And it was cheap cider because that's all we could afford because I wasn't working, I wasn't making money. And I was just this shell of a man, right? And so I go into, and even my family, like I don't know how she still stayed with me. I don't know how she still stayed with me. By all means, she should have left. And I look back and I think, I don't know how she managed to stay with me. I don't know what she's seen in me that she thought that she would stay with me. Even my family said to her, my family agreed and said that we won't hold it against you, and they do not blame if she leaves me. But she didn't. She stayed with me, right? Despite all the shit I was putting her through, right? And despite everything that was going on, and I just I just can't believe that that's how far it took me. So I got the place in rehab, and this gave me another opportunity to kind of get my shit together. But I blew that as well. I got kicked out halfway through a 6-month placement for breaking the rules. So when I came out, I had all these promises in the world to make stuff right. And before you knew it, again, I'm back sneaking drinks, smoking weed, and it's just accumulating. Cocaine's back in the picture. But this time, there was something different. Right? I had a plan that I was going to sort my shit out. Right? I always dreamt of being a barber. So I had this nice car at the time. So I had this nice BMW at the time, and I said, I'm going to sell my car. I'm going to spend the money and checking out a barbering academy. And that's what I done. So I started attending the academy, but I was still drinking. I was still smoking weed, but I had a vision now. I was working towards something. And I wasn't just oblivious. I had a vision in my mind. And also I had this genuine desire to be sober. Right? I hated drinking. I hated who it made me. But because I couldn't stop, I didn't know what else to do. But the desire to stop was there. Deep down it was there. And then the barbering academy was a few hours from my home. Right. So my mum stayed in Glasgow. It was in Glasgow. So I would go there for 3 days at a time. Right. And that travel time up there gave me time to reflect, and it gave me time to read. And this is when I was first properly introduced to manifestation. Someone gave me the book The Secret, and I read that back to front in record time. And I don't care what MD says about that book, right? But that book helped change my life, right? It gave me something that I hadn't had in a long time, and that was belief. A belief that I could create a life that I wanted. And my dream wasn't just to cut hair; it was to actually own my own barber shop. So I'm in the academy, and people are asking what you're going to do after this, and everyone is talking about placements, going to work for somewhere. And I just said I'm going to open a place of my own. And when I told people, they would laugh at me. Nobody believed me. Even when I told Jenna, my wife, she didn't believe me. But that just made me even more determined. So I started planning, right? I started researching exactly what I needed to open the shop. I priced every single equipment out. I mapped out the floor plan, even though I didn't know what the shop looked like. Right? I spent every spare minute studying, visualizing, building that blueprint in my head, all while still drinking and smoking weed heavily. In fact, when I was smoking and the drinking, it was like I was in this zone, and it gave me I don't know if it gave me more creativity, but I felt like that, especially with the painkillers. I would take them, and I would just be in this zone where I would just be, that's all I focused on. So I was doing that, and then a couple of months before my graduation, I'd done all the planning, I'd visualized as much as I possibly could, but nobody believed me, right? Nobody, I had no money, and my past painted a picture of somebody who fucks everything up. And one morning I just woke up and I said to Jenna, I'm going out to go and get the money for the shop. And I just left the house. So I went out and looked at a few locations, and I found this perfect location. So I called the estate agent, and they said, somebody's already put an offer on it, but we have one across the street. So I looked across the road, and there was just this one, and it had a big window, but it wasn't big. It was like this window, and it looked like a small shop. So I go across the street and I look at it, and it's exactly the layout that I'd been drawn on my pad. It was this, it had the front bit there, and it had steps that went up, and then another bit at the top. And that's exactly how I'd visioned it, because I had the floor here, and then at the top, I had this pool table, and I had a PlayStation. That was all the visions in my head. So now I just needed the money. So I called my mum and explained everything. And my mum didn't really have a lot of money, but she knew my mum wanted the best for me. She always wanted what was best. And she went and done everything she possibly could to try and make sure that I would, that whatever I could to to give me hope and inspiration, and that's why I say my mum is just, she never gave up on me, like Jenna never gave up on me. They women are, I don't know what I would do without them. I just love both of them so deeply in my heart. But anyway, my mum said, leave it with me. So a few hours later, she calls me back and she said, listen, son, I can get you a few grand to get you started. And that's all I needed. That's all I needed. I thought, I said, that'll get me the lease and I'll find the rest as I go. And that was it. Boom, I was off to the races. So I signed the lease and I ordered all the basics, the flooring, the paint, the mirrors, the chairs. And then my brother-in-law and my father-in-law, they're kind of builders. So they helped me build that entire shop out with old wood. And when it was finished, it was perfect, just exactly how I envisioned it. Right. And it was the best. So I was due to graduate in the middle of January and the shop opened on the 21st of January. And it was basically just about finished inside. I had no front sign at the front yet, but I didn't care. I was going to open anyway. And I was finally building something and it gave me a new lease in life, but still, I was still drinking. Right? I was still drinking daily. I was still smoking weed daily. I was still causing problems at home. But now I was working. I was working every day. I had a sense of pride. I loved what I was doing. I was building something. And then I started going to the gym again. I was beginning to look better physically, feel better mentally. And I entered this fitness competition. So now the shop's open nearly a year and we're in November. And I entered this fitness competition and it's to see who can make the best progress in a month. It's called the 28-day challenge by Ross I can't pronounce his, but it's aesthetically trained. And I won it. So the prize was 12 weeks coaching to start on the 1st of January. And this was just, so nearly a year as the shop opened. This gave me something different. It gave me accountability. It gave me structure. It gave me a plan. Right. So I started working the program, and as the program's coming to an end, drinking's cut down, but my weed and painkillers is increased massively. Okay, and if people don't know about painkillers these were opiates, right? So these were basically like synthetic heroin, and my painkiller use is going through the roof. My weed's going through the roof, but the alcohol has cut down significantly. But I'm just substituting one drug for the next. Then COVID hits. Now, this is the worst thing that could happen for my business, but this is the best thing that ever happened to me, right? Suddenly, I'm at home with my family, surrounded by my family. I have time to reflect, and I promise myself, I am not going to use this time to get fucking hammered every day. I'm going to use this time to build a better me. And I made a promise to myself to that at that time there. My promises meant nothing to anybody else, but I meant a promise to myself. So I downloaded Audible and I just started getting personal development books and I started, just ingesting them as quick as I could read them. I was out walking with my dog in nature and I came across a book called The 5am Club, which then reintroduced me to meditation and journaling. So I had already been great because the COVID had shut my shop down, but the gym that I used to train at was right behind my shop and I'd built a good relationship up with the owner of the gym. So he let me use some of his equipment to build a small gym at the back of my shop. So I could still use the gym. So the 5am Club is got the 20-20-20 formula. So 20 minutes exercise, 20 minutes meditation, 20 minutes journaling or personal development, some type of reading. So this was it. So I started doing this and I committed to it for 66 days. So I started meditating. I would run and I would run up to and where I live is beautiful scenery. There's an ocean. So I would run down to the ocean, up the cliffs, and I would meditate on the cliffs. And then I would listen to a personal development book on the way back, and I would come home and I would journal. And then in the afternoon, I would go and train at the gym. So I was meditating every day. I was reading every day. I was working out every day. I was eating better. And I could notice things I could notice my perception of life and just how I was appreciating little things like, I would see butterflies, I would see snails, I would be more aware of what's going on around about me. And even though at this point here, my weed smoking's crazy. I'm smoking so much weed. I'm taking so much painkillers. And, but then, then something magical happens to me, right? And I've described this in other videos, okay? And there's no way to really describe what happened that day, not to put it into words. I was feeling low, and I was thinking about my brother who died of an overdose, okay? But this is the thing, right? If this didn't happen this day, I don't think I would be alive, and I genuinely say that, right? It was a Sunday, it was during lockdown, and so I'm feeling this shit about my brother, and I phone my mum, and she's like, "Listen, son, you couldn't have done anything more, just let it go." Right? So uh, I couldn't let it go. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go into the shop and train. And as I go in, I put on my usual playlist. right? Didn't feel right, right? So I just picked this random playlist. It was rock music, his favourite music. The first song that came on, one of his favourite bands, Linkin Park, right? And then I'm starting to play the air guitar, right? Like a fucking dafty. And then out of nowhere, I have this thought, right? I'm going to learn to play the guitar for you, Scott. So I grab my journal, I write it, learn to play the guitar, love and miss you, bro, love, heart, and a kiss. And then it was like, something magical happened, right? This energy overtook my body. It was like pure love. It was pure relief. It wasn't sadness. Tears just started streaming down my face, and not tears of sadness. This was just like a magical experience. And then Papa Roach comes on. That's the last band he saw live. And then the song, it says I'm crying. And then every song that came on was a connection to him. And this was the universe, God speaking directly to me. And I remember thinking, I need to get out, because I was at the front of the shop, I need to get out. So I go to the back of the shop, and when I get to the back of the shop, I just have these visions, right? And I hear it as clear as day. Lachlan, everything's going to be all right. You're going to be all right. Your life's going to be all right. And it was just so clear. And then I just dropped to my knees and I'm saying, thank you, God. Thank you, God. And I didn't really believe in God at this point, right? Because I had no reason to, because of my life. And then I have these flash visions, and everything's came true in the visions except for the one about the house. But this is what I understand now, right? That voice wasn't coming from outside me. Wasn't coming from the clouds. It was coming from inside me, right? That part of me that's always been there, but it's been buried with guilt, shame, fear, addiction. And that was me speaking the real me, right? Because we're all connected. God is in all of us. We are all God, right? We're just having this experience. We are fractals of God. Okay, so that was my spiritual awakening that changed everything. And see, since that day, I've been sober since that day. And I know how wild that sounds, but that's the truth. And if you've ever doubted miracles happening, I'm telling you, you're looking at one right now, because I didn't decide to get sober that day, right? That was something that happened, and I was called to it. And once you hear the voice of your God within, you cannot unhear that, right? And rebuilding didn't happen overnight. There wasn't one moment where suddenly I became the man that I wanted to be. It was more like learning how to live again for the first time. As I started showing up differently, really showing up for myself, right? Not perfectly, not with all the answers, but just showing up. I committed to my training every day, but again, it wasn't to look good. It was because it gave me clarity, right? Where I could, process all the shit that was going on. I kept meditating, I kept journaling, I kept waking up. For years, the 5 a.m. was my 4:45 was my wake up time, and then I've went to 3:45. Now I'm back at 4:45, but it was something that I committed to every single day, to stay off the drink, to stay off the drugs. And even when times got hard, even when the voice in my head would say, listen, just have one, right? And this is the thing. I didn't do it alone. There's people who helped me, like my wife, Jenna, my family, my mum, my dad, everybody. They've always been there, but I just never listened to them, right? Especially my wife. She stuck with me through hell. And I slowly started to becoming the man that she believed I could be. And more than that, I started becoming the man that my kids deserved. Not just some random, just some guy in the room, but one they could look up to and say, that's my dad. And for the first time in years, I could look in the mirror and not feel disgust. I could look in my kids' eyes and not feel shame. Right? I could walk into the house and not feel like a fraud. And sometimes I still find it hard to believe that I've been sober since that day. No meetings, no relapse, no plan. Just that moment that altered my entire course in life. And that is a miracle in my eyes. And I can't explain what happened that day to anybody. All I know is that something spoke to me that broke something bigger than me. And once I felt that, I knew it was real. I couldn't unknow it because I was so skeptical about all that stuff. I never believed in any of it. But that moment opened my eyes to a whole new reality, not just about addiction, just about life itself. It made me hungry to understand more, not just from books and gurus, but from direct experience. And that's what I got, right? And that day changed it. After that, I had communications from guides who I never knew existed. Archangel Michael, Jesus, the Pleiadian ancestors. There's so many different ones. And I'm not here to convince anyone. I don't really give a shit if you believe me or not. I'm just telling you my experience and what happened to me. And I've been guided ever since. And one of the clearest messages I got was everything you went through was preparation, right? The pain, the violence, the shame, the years of addiction, the guilt that nearly killed me. It was preparing me for what I came here to do. And another message that came through in the same conversation with Archangel Michael was, you were chosen. And I don't know what he meant, right? I still don't fully understand, right? But I know it's not who I used to be, and I'll never go back to that. So after my awakening, my purpose started to become clearer. If I could come back from where I was, then I could help others do the same. So I made the decision to step into that purpose, even when it made no sense to anyone else. One day I just remember standing in my barber shop, right? Someone that I truly loved and I'd built from scratch, right? And this just thought came into my head, right? It's time to let it go. And at first I thought, no way. I built this. I worked for this. I love this place. But that thought wouldn't leave me, right? And deep down, I knew that this was this thought was right. Right? It was guidance. Because I'd already been warned, you know, the spirit guides had told me before that I wouldn't be there for much longer, but I didn't know what they meant, right? So I took a photo, I put it up for sale, and, you know, within a short amount of time, it had so many people interested in it because it was beautiful. But everyone thought I'd lost my mind. My friends asking if I'm okay. My Jenna was freaking out. She's like, what you doing? My mum, everyone's thinking, you're crazy. But they didn't see what I saw. They hadn't been prepared in the way that I had been prepared. I knew that I wasn't meant to cut hair anymore. I was meant to cut through the illusion. And what I didn't realise at the time was that selling the shop was never the end. It was just the beginning. Because the moment I stepped towards my purpose, right, this is when the real work began. And I threw myself into it, right, studying, learning, healing. I got so many qualifications, from personal training to energy healing to life coaching, spiritual life coaching. You know, I learned how to coach. I became a coach. I learned how to listen. But more than anything, to I learned how to be myself. And the next 5 years, they weren't glamorous. They were like uncomfortable. They were lonely, filled with doubts and darkness and that consistent inner work. And I had to go through what I call the lone wolf stage, which is the dark night of the soul, ego death, painful lessons, hard truth. I had to let go of the old version of me, piece by piece. Not just the addict, but the reputation, the masks, all of it. I had to become not someone new. I had to remember who I was underneath it all by stripping away everything that wasn't mine. And now, 5, maybe 6 years later, after countless spiritual experiences, you know, removing layer upon layer, I feel ready. Not perfect, but I'm prepared. Prepared to step into the mission that I came here for. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm speaking now. This is why this YouTube channel exists. Because right now, this is the next beginning. And for once, I'm not scared of not knowing what's next. In fact, I'm glad I don't know. Because if there's one thing that I've learned, is that when you let go of everything you think you are, you let the universe guide you. And what comes next is more magical than you could ever plan. The process is the path, right? The obstacle is the way. And for now, after everything, finally feel proud of the man that I've become. That's the most important part for me, right? Not because I've made it, because I'm finally ready to be seen. Now is my time. And see if you're still in it, still using, still lying, still pretending. I see you, brother. And I'm not here to judge, right? I've been you. I know what it's like to look in that mirror and hate the man staring back. To feel like you've gone too far. Like you've done too much damage to ever make it right. I know what it's like to hide the bottles, to lie to people you love, you know, hurt people that you love, right? And still find a way to make it their fault. I know what it's like to tell yourself that you're in control, to say, this is a promise, today's the last time, to make promises and then break them within hours. And you want to stop so badly, but you feel like something else is just driving your body. And I know what it's like to want to die. Not because you hate life, but because you just don't want to live the way you're living anymore. Because the weight of all your mistakes feel far too heavy to carry. And I need you to hear me. You're not too far gone. Not even close. You're not broken, I promise you. See, under all that pain, all that shame, under that story you've told yourself 1,000 times, okay? You're much greater than that. Right? See that voice in your head that will often lie to you? It's the same one that told me to drink myself into oblivion. But here I am, sober, free, alive, and more myself than I've ever been. Not because I've followed a perfect plan, not because I'm stronger than anyone, right? Because something inside me woke up. Something inside me finally started listening, right? And there's a version of you waiting to be born, right? That man who is strong, He has a purpose. He's living with clarity. You know, the one that your kids admire, the one that your younger self would look up to. But you've got to choose him every single day, even when it's hard, even when you don't feel ready, even when you feel scared shitless, especially then. Right? So I'm not here to say I have everything or the blueprint. I'm just here to give you proof that it's possible. And if I can make it out, I promise you, so can you. Right? And there is something that you're here to be doing, or you wouldn't be listening to me right now. Okay? I'm not some guru. I'm not special. I'm not gifted. Don't pretend to have all the answers. I'm just a man who's been to hell and made it out with the light still burning. I'm not perfect, but you know what? I'm present. I'm not above anyone. I'm just willing to be seen now. And for so many years I didn't. My only goal now is just to be the lighthouse, to stand firm and shine my light, even when the storm hits. So maybe, just maybe, someone out there who's lost in their own darkness sees that light and remembers who the fuck they are. And if that helps them come home to their truth, to their purpose, to their power, so that they can then shine the light too, and then someone else will see their light. This is how we heal the world, one soul remembering at a time. Right? And if this story touched anything in you, don't let it fade. Right? You're not here by accident. You found this video because something in you is ready. Right? Stop lying to yourself. Stop running from who you really are and become the man you were born to be. Right? Leave a comment. Tell me where you're at. Tell me, what hit you the hardest. Or just even type me, just so that I know you're there listening. Right? And if you're serious about changing your life, then come and join me on this journey. I don't want to do this alone. I want to build a brotherhood of men who are ready to stand on their own 2 feet. Because this is not about likes and vanity and shares and all that shit. This is about helping men rise to reach their full potential. Men who know they've got more inside them. Men who are done with the bullshit. Men who are ready to heal, to lead, and to live with purpose. This is just the beginning. And see, if nobody's told you in a long time, I love you, brother. I believe in you. Right, now let's go do what we came here to do. Okay, and as always, I truly appreciate you for being on this journey with me. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I love you, and I'll catch you on the next one. The video here, and you can subscribe here. Take care. Bye.